Mr. Speaker, I come from the great state of Michigan, also known as the Great Lakes State, and I've lived my entire life along the shores of this national treasure. And for those of us in Michigan and the other Great Lakes, the other Great Lakes states, the Great Lakes are not just the source of much of our drinking water or a place that we go to enjoy their natural beauty or recreational opportunities or where so many work and make a living. They're central to our very identity. And that's why I've made the protection of the Great Lakes a principal advocacy during all of the years that I've been in public service. The Great Lakes actually represent fully 1/5 or 20% of the freshwater drinking supply on the entire planet. They provide the drinking water supply to tens of millions in our nation and millions more in Canada as well. They're also vital to our economy. Over 160 million tons of commercial cargo is shipped on the Great Lakes. This commerce supports over 227,000 jobs. It contributes over $33 billion to the economy. The recreational aspect of the Great Lakes also builds our economy. Recreational boating on the Great Lakes supports over 100,000 jobs, $16 billion in economic activity, and then the secondary effect of all of that means an additional 244,000 jobs, $19 billion in additional economic activity. Of course, that includes boat manufacturers and marinas and charter operators, other businesses as well. So a healthy Great Lakes system is not only important to our economy in Michigan or the Great Lakes states, it's important for the entire nation. And today, unfortunately, the use of those waters is threatened by our inability to maintain our ports and our channels and our harbors. We've had actually a decade of below normal water levels, and we've had very limited or uncoordinated federal funding for harbor dredging and infrastructure repair, and so that has really dramatically curtailed shipping, and it's made actually some of our recreational harbors almost inaccessible. In fact, this year many of our recreational harbors were really in crises as the low water levels made the need for dredging vital to the economic survival of so many communities. We as a nation, Mr. Speaker, must recognize the importance of the Great Lakes and give this natural wonder the properly coordinated support that it needs. That's why I've joined with several of my Michigan colleagues, Bill Huizenga and Dan Banachek, to introduce the Great Lakes Navigation System Sustainability Act. Our legislation is supported by the Great Lakes Maritime Task Force, the Great Lakes Metro Chambers of Commerce, the Lakes Carriers Association, the American Great Lakes Port Association, the Great Lakes Small Harbors Coalition, the National Marine Manufacturers Association, the United States Great Lakes Shipping Association, and the Great Lakes Commission, as well as the Great Lakes Governors Association. And so I was very pleased that the chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Bill Schuster, worked with us to include important provisions of that legislation in the Water Resources Reform and Development Act, also known as the WRRDA Act, which we will be voting on in this House later on today. The most important of these provisions will establish the Great Lakes Navigational System and require the Army Corps of Engineers to look at the Great Lakes system in its entirety rather than looking at port by port when they are thinking about dredging and maintenance. This would really end the practice of pitting one port in the Great Lakes against another, and instead it focuses on the interdependence of all of them. The WRRDA bill also helps recognize our recreational harbors by providing 10% of all the funds authorized by the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to be directed toward recreational harbors. This type of funding will allow recreational harbors across the Great Lakes to have another opportunity for needed dredging support. Places like Port Huron or Lexington or Port Sanilac, Harbor Beach, Port Austin, Sebewaing, and many others. Those are just in my district, but there are so many others throughout the entire basin as well. Mr. Speaker, if you travel to the state of Michigan and visit the shores of the Great Lakes, you will find the magnificence of what we call pure Michigan. But as possessive as those of us from Michigan are of the Great Lakes, we also recognize that they are pure American. And so this incredible natural wonder deserves a recognition and protection from our entire nation. And today we can take a very important step forward in the protection of the Great Lakes, our magnificent Great Lakes, by passing the WRRDA bill. And I certainly urge all of my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields.